The information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice.
Hey, it's Nikki. Thrilled to hand the mic over to our friends at TestRx MD. You might remember David and me sharing our pretty in-depth health journey last year, from a devastating diagnosis to our taking health by the driver's seat. We chose to partner A to B first with the health professionals that have helped us most. Collectively, David and I, we lost over 60 pounds, and so many other aspects of our health have us feeling more lively and confident these days. So look, we're on a learning journey with you, and we know you agree. Health is so crucial to our ability to live our best lives. P.S. Don't wait to hit this team up at TestRx MD for a free concierge coaching call. There's a link in the show notes, or feel free to ask us. But this action could be the start of a whole new you. It was for us. So I'm passing the mic to our partners at TestRx MD.
Hey guys, welcome back to Activate Your Best Health podcast with myself, John Nieters, Dr. Saddoris, and other co-host Leslie Snider as well. Today, we're going to be getting into anti-aging and longevity practices. This specific part, there's going to be a two-part episode here. The first part's going to be more skin and energy based. The second part is going to be more about like neuroprotective, protecting from Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases. So recently, I've been getting into more of the anti-aging practices myself as I start to get up there and a little bit older, and aches and pains and all that. And so I've been trying to dive into what really causes aging, and then knowing the difference between your cellular age and then your actual biological age. And so Dr. Saddoris is going to be pretty active on this one, as she's going to have a lot of the medical insights into all of these things. But we'll first get into what causes aging. And then we'll kind of get into like factors of that, lifestyle strategies to combat aging, and then some supplements, and then biohacking abilities as well to really optimize your body for longevity, as that's truly what most people probably want, is to have a better life and a longer life while they're here on this planet, and also mindset and meditative practices. All right, so getting into what causes aging. So, Dr. Saddoris, we'll have you kind of take the wheel here and get into cellular aging and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, I think the most important part is thinking, what exactly is aging? You know, we see the appearance of it happening, but what is actually going on internally? And those are the things that we need to focus on. And so one of the biggest things is that, you know, cells have to divide and produce new cells. And over time, cells start not producing and dividing as frequently, and they get slower and slower, and then sometimes they actually don't divide. And so in that process of slowing down is when the cells start showing the physical findings of aging that happens to our body. But we can kind of measure our cellular health versus what is our actual age. And they found on DNA strands that there was these little tags of proteins on the ends of them that we call telomere aging. And as people get older, those telomeres used to be really long, and as they get older, they get shorter and shorter and shorter. And that's really what your biological age is. You know, biological aging can be, speeded up, by any kind of chronic disease. Chronic diseases typically cause inflammation, and inflammation causes damage to the cells. And our body is made of membranes. And so not only is our skin is made of membranes, but every part of our body, every cell of our body is a membrane. But also, importantly, inside the cells, there's membranes. There's membranes around the mitochondria, which is what causes energy production of the cells. So if the mitochondria membranes are damaged, what happens with all of the different processes to produce energy, because there's electron flows and we produce these negative charged ions in the body, and these are called free radicals. And these free radicals then attack the membranes and cause injury. And then the body tries to repair it. And every time there's a repair, it never works as well as it did before. And so we get DNA damage happens with all those electrons flowing around. The oxidative stress that can happen from chronic illnesses. And also sometimes the foods that we eat can create more problems with higher free radical productions. And there's some foods that are protective. And then, of course, inflammation. I mean, you get a cold, you get a sore throat, you get COVID, you get diabetes, you get cardiovascular disease. All of those things, you get too much belly fat. All of those create an inflammatory response. It's no wonder that we had more deaths in people with COVID who happened to have a large belly fat, because belly fat itself is inflammatory to begin with, and it was an inflammatory disease, COVID. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot more sicker people post-COVID than we did pre-COVID because of this damage that had happened. And then we got the hormonal changes. As our hormones drop, especially estrogen and testosterone, those definitely have an effect on our cells in our body, but also on our brain. But there are other hormones that are being changed. We have exones that stimulate our body to produce recovery type cells. And unfortunately, a lot of people think anti-aging is something that people get maybe when they retire. But they're really finding at age 25 that we start seeing some significant drops in a lot of different peptides and a lot of different enzyme systems that are functioning or being reduced at that age. So we really should be thinking about that. I had actually studied, there was a chemo drug that they were recommending to take in your early 20s to slow down the aging process. But, taking a chemotherapy drug at a person young without an illness, it has its own sort of risk, so we don't know what that long-term was, but they were predicting that those who did take those specific type of chemo drugs, that they would have a longer lifespan. And they really couldn't figure out exactly what was why that would be so. But it was kind of an interesting phenomenon that you're going to find all kinds of people quoting this and that to help aging. But the reality is a lot of it's not been studied. But we're going to go over the things that we do know that are beneficial and helpful in terms of slowing the aging process.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. One thing that I've really kind of gone on the deep dive on, especially as I've come to Vegas, is, how do you alter your environment to promote that longevity? So you get into environmental toxins and you start looking at 5G, Wi-Fi in your home. How are you able to negate these things? And one thing that I uncovered recently actually was utilizing a bag of Himalayan salt to just set on your phone at night. If it's anywhere near you when you sleep, let's back up. The first thing you ultimately want to do is not be next to your, you can do is put your phone on your nightstand right next to your head, right? So you want to get that away from you, ideally in another room. If you can't, for whatever reason, you can put a bag of pink Himalayan salt on top, and that helps transmute some of those EMF frequencies, which the more of a deep dive you guys do on these things, the more you're going to realize that the specific frequencies that they use, like the 2.4 gigahertz, the 5.8 gigahertz that they use for these bands, are honestly some of the most detrimental to your cellular health possible. It's almost by design, ironically. And then we'll kind of get into exercise, stress, mindset, and all that kind of stuff as well. So now we're going to kind of segue into the lifestyle strategies to combat aging. Leslie going to be crucial on this section because his background is more of the exercise science and training sort of thing. So we'll first kind of get into nutrition and diet and kind of segue into physical activity, and then obviously get the medical perspective as well from Dr. Saddoris. Take the mic, Leslie.
Yeah, it's something that longevity and anti-aging I dove into when I first started to kind of look at hormones and, why am I yo-yoing weight-wise? Why do I not feel well? All these things. I'm supposed to be a, fitness and nutrition guy, and I can't even fix myself, let alone somebody else, So I started diving into that, started really getting into intermittent fasting, seeing how the body, has to rest. And one of the things that I'm really big on is our gut microbiome. I think it's just a huge factor in why we are, as a society, just sick all the time. We never rest that. And they say that that's our second brain, right? But in all reality, that's probably our first one. If you go back, obviously, thousands and thousands of years, that bundle of nerves in our gut was probably the first one. It's like, oh, feed me. I got to go find food, right? So then, through the process of, cooking foods and things like that, we started to develop our second brain, which is in our dome here. So, but yeah, I'm really big on the intermittent fasting, the anti-inflammatory diets, which would be, plant-based and Mediterranean. People always ask me, like, what diet do I do? And I'm just like, well, I've done every diet known to man, And the reason I did this was I've done the vegan diet, I've done vegetarian, ketogenic. I wanted to be able to experience these things. That way I can, speak on it from a personal standpoint. And none of these diets are sustainable. They're just not. Except for those two, the plant-based. I'm a firm believer in not eating dairy products. Not just me because I'm lactose intolerant, but it also has, I just don't believe that we're meant to digest cow milk. It's one of those things. And you guys can speak on that as well, but dairy products are in just about everything that we consume, and we walk around with, like Dr. Saddoris said, we have inflammation, and a lot of that's due to diet, So, and then we lack stress. We're more sedentary than ever, so we're not getting in exercise. We're not getting in the strength training, the cardiovascular exercise, flexibility and balance. And on top of that, we're not sleeping well. So this has to be a holistic approach, at least that I take. And then with my clients, we talk about it all the time. It's like, we got to take a holistic approach to this thing. We don't just go in and do cardio for an hour and that's it. Or we don't just go in and do weight training or, things like that. Or we don't eat healthy plant-based diet for a week out of a month. This is one of these things that it's continuing. And I just had that conversation on Saturday with one client. It's like, hey, man, we, he's all nervous. He's a younger guy. And what happens if I go over or I do this? It's like, nothing bad's going to happen if we, mess up one day. It's the continuing of that allows these free radicals and all this other stuff to detriment our health. So I try to speak on hey, if you mess up, don't try to make up. Just go back to what you're supposed to be doing the next day, from a dietary standpoint. But, caloric restriction, we eat a lot of calories. I do caloric restriction when I want to drop body fat, but I also count my calories and macronutrients and my micros for the most part on a regular basis, no matter what. It's one of those things that's just habit, whether I'm eating 3,000 calories or whether I'm eating 1,500. I'm keeping track of these things. And that's something we don't do either because, I look at some of the caloric intake on foods and it's astounding how many calories is, let's say my wife's favorite dessert, cheesecake. You go to the Cheesecake Factory and they tell you right on there too, this is 2,200 calories per slice. And you're like, I don't even have that in a day. I don't know what we're doing here. And then but sleep and stress management is also, important. The quality of sleep is huge. If you think about this, if we're overeating, how well are we sleeping? And it's become really acceptable for us to feed our face 24/7. I mean, you get people at work and they do Zoom meetings and they're sitting there eating on a Zoom meeting. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that would have never happened. I mean, we didn't have Zoom meetings really then, but you wouldn't go in and, eat all the time. And it's acceptable. I'm driving down the street and I don't know how many people I see just eating in the car. Sometimes that might not be an option for them not to eat in the car. But, we can't even drive 30 minutes without eating. My kids are bad too. So it's like, hey, I want a snack. We had just ate dinner 2 minutes ago. Could I get a snack? So, the food industry has created a whole new meal basically within our lives. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, old school 3, and now a snack, breakfast snack, lunch snack, dinner snack. So that was created by the food industry. That wasn't something it's not normal for us to do that all the time, eat. But yeah, and then, you got supplements as well. I take quite a bit of supplements because it's really hard to get, everything you need in your diet. So look at what you need, and not everybody's the same. So we have to take this. I take it from a coaching standpoint on an individual basis, and you can't just say, okay, here's one diet that works for me. Now you follow my diet. So that might not work for you, John. We take, and we'll start you off, and then we have to make adjustments on the fly. Like, okay, this isn't working. Let's try this and that. And it's up to the clients to really find out. They have to log, keep track. That way, hey, I ate this and I'm sick for the next 2 hours. Well, guess what? Don't eat that no more. So I got a buddy. He thinks he smokes cigars and he thinks it's the cigar that gives him the IBS. And I'm like, it's probably the large amount of dairy that you eat that gives you the IBS, but I haven't really dove into the cigar factor at all on creating the IBS, so I don't really speak on it. I let him think what he wants, but yeah, it's probably his diet more than the cigar intake.
No, so I think that intermittent fasting is really very important. And I started doing that when I was really struggling with keeping my weight down. You lose your weight, then you gain it all back and maybe 5 more pounds. And as you continue in that kind of cycle, it just gets worse and worse. And so I started reading about the intermittent fasting, and I do that every day. I try to stop eating at 5 or 5:30 in the evening, and then I don't eat again until 5 or 5:30 in the morning. And so I'm giving myself basically almost 12 hours. And because it's in the evening time, I don't really feel that hungry. Initially, I did, and I would learn to drink water because the fasting we didn't want sugars or sugary drinks. But I'd flavor it if I got super hungry. Then I might eat some green beans or something just to fill my stomach. But after a while, I don't feel that anymore. I can go those 12 hours without a problem. But the science part of it is that we produce a lot of free radicals or just for digesting food. And those are built up in our system. We have a lot of inflammation that's created by that. So when we're not eating, we're not creating any of those free radicals or to the degree we were before. And we're allowing the mitochondria, which is the part of the cell that produces energy, starts to repair itself during that time. So it becomes more efficient. And so then it allows you to burn your calories more effectively the next day. And I think that, one of the biggest signs of aging is reduction in energy. And where our mitochondria are damaged, we are producing less energy. Well, energy is basically electron flow, okay, from one, even a solid, what we think of a solid table is basically electrons flowing back and forth, but they're very tightly knit, so it feels solid versus when it's loosely knit, it feels more like air. And so our body needs to maintain its cellular energy. And if we are not having it, guess what we start feeling is fatigue. And we get a lot of that fatigue when we eat a lot of carbs and we're releasing insulin, and insulin's bottoming out our blood sugars, and it's depriving our cells the proper nutrition it needs on a controlled basis instead of being overly whelmed with it. And we form belly fat and then not having enough and being starving when it goes into the low stages. And so we need to maintain what we call homeostasis, which is kind of keeping a balance between the amount that we're consuming and versus the amount that we're expending. And so I think that is very important that we be cognizant. I mean, when I used to exercise, then I thought, gee, I deserve to eat more food, right? After I exercised, right? I mean, that as a reward, right? And that, and I had to stop thinking of food as a reward and change my mindsets. And I stopped eating when I'm no longer hungry. I don't stop because, hey, it tastes good. I want a whole bunch more. If I'm not hungry, that's when I need to stop, because we stop losing that ability to sense fullness when we overeat too much. Our stomach enlarges. And as we gain more belly fat, then we lose that ability to sense fullness. And so we definitely is one of the factors why people keep eating and eating and eating, because they aren't, picking up the sensation of fullness anymore.
Awesome. Thank you guys both for that. And I definitely wanted to highlight on a couple of things that each of you said. Number one, I think Dr. Saddoris, previously you kind of mentioned that difference or differentiating between stopping your meal or eating when you feel full versus when you're so engorged that you feel like you just ate at Thanksgiving or when you're not hungry anymore, I guess is the right word.
Stop no longer hungry.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And then Leslie, there are a couple things that you touched on. I had to write them down to make sure I was going to remember. But the compounding effect of, even if you fall off the bandwagon for your diet, and I take this same practice to what Leslie just touched on to life in general. Even if you feel like you messed up one day, right? It's the compounding effect of what you're doing that day. Same with your diet, right? So if you mess up, can't do anything about the past, can't do anything about the future. You can only do with what's in front of you. So just get back on the bandwagon when you can, effectively. And then another thing that you said, Leslie, how can you expect to increase your longevity or have that anti-aging effect? Or again, this applies to life in general. If you're not conscious of it, if you're not aware of something, how can you do anything about it to make it better? So with Leslie's point of making sure that you're able to log your caloric intake, log your exercise so that you're aware of what's going on, especially so that you can go back and review it in the future, which I thought was very, very powerful. Thank you for that, Leslie. And then another part of this too is that cortisol aspect of making sure that you have enough stress in your body to grow from it or to get stronger without having too much to where you're so overstressed that it's detrimental. So I kind of think of this as it applies to life in general. Like, how do you expect to grow without challenging yourself, right? So that stress, that cortisol happens through challenging yourself. Now you can do this through mindfulness meditations, right? So like if you meditate, you're able to deal with some of that cortisol. So if you have a stressful situation, you can sit there and be with your own thoughts to just kind of dispel all of that stuff and connect with yourself and just recharge. That time when you meditate, that should not be looked at as a chore. That is your time. You're doing that for you to better yourself. And that kind of goes along with when you sleep, you're getting those cortisol levels to reset as well so that your body can heal and prepare for everything the next day. So I thought that was super powerful. Thank you guys.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. So yeah, that's very important, the meditation side. I meditate on a regular basis. People probably think I'm weird because I'll sit there and I'll put my headphones on and I'll sit in my, legs crossed and I'll be in the gym and I'll do that. I'll get my time in. That's me. Close my eyes and concentrate on my breathing. And that, that's just part of it. It's part of my recovery from a mental standpoint and a physical standpoint. That was very important.
And I think the sleep pattern is really important too. It's something that I struggle with because my husband sleeps at a different times than I do. And he wakes me up when I'm not trying to wake up, but that we are technically, ideally, we should be getting 7 to 8 hours a day of sleep. And yet Americans' lifestyle is, 4 or 5 hours or even less. And it's just like, I got so many things to do and all of this. And I think sometimes we may have to relook at our life and say, what are things that we really have to do? And what are things that are truly not that important? And do we have to have our house perfectly picked up and cleaned and immaculate every day? Or do we generally do it, kind of keep it up, but we're not spending 5 hours cleaning when we could be doing other things for ourselves, like a meditation moment to take care of our stress? Sometimes when we don't have good sleep, then we don't concentrate very well. So a task takes longer. So maybe even if we'd be so much more efficient in our time if we did have proper rest and relaxation. Because our brain is actually, while we're sleeping, is putting information into categories in our brain. It allows us our creativity to kick in. It allows things that I know when I used to do calculus and I'd struggle with a problem and finally I'd go to bed and then the next morning I looked at it and, oh, this is simple, and I immediately had the answer. And yet I didn't the night before. So during that sleeping time, what I thought I was sleeping, my brain was functioning and creating and working on situations. And we need that time for the brain to not be distracted by a lot of other things and to allow the brain to kind of get in that recovery phase, which is important.
So what are your thoughts on, and I try to coach this with some of my clients, so on the recovery side, and it may not be meditation for them, because I enjoy a hobby of baking. And when I bake, I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about anything else. It's just me. I'm doing something that I enjoy doing. So I try to coach that as well. It's like, as Americans, I think our hobbies have gone by the wayside, especially if you have kids.
Oh, yeah.
And the amount of physical activities that they're involved in these days, they never stop. I mean, it's one basketball, football, dance class after another. I mean, it wears on you, So if we don't have hobbies, something to take our mind off of, being able to relax and get better sleep, because now I just worked all day long. I did 2 hours of soccer practice, dance class, and it's 8:00. I got to feed the kid, What am I feeding my kids? Because I ain't got time to cook them anything now. I'm junk food. Let's stop at McDonald's because it's bedtime almost. Let me get, and I'm guilty of that sometimes because of the activities. And you're like, we need to slow down a little bit, but I'm cognizant of that. And I try to, put that into my coaching as well. It's like, hey, we need to take a step back, and what do you enjoy doing? Is it a physical activity like mountain biking, road biking? Do you like bowling? Do you like whatever that hobby is? Take time, enjoy that hobby. So that's just my philosophy on that.
Oh, yeah, I think that's very important. I don't think that replaces the need to connect with yourself.
Right.
So sometimes we get so caught in the busyness that we sometimes lose sight of where am I going? And I think that's where meditation is it allows you to refocus yourself and say, what is important in my life and what is not? I mean, I have this jar that I can fill with sand and not have anything important that I wanted to accomplish, or am I putting in the rocks that are important in there first and then adding the sand after that, right? So I have to really sit there and decide what's important to me that I want to achieve, because everything that you want to achieve is going to require energy and direction and purpose and perseverance. I know that from writing my book on addiction. I mean, perseverance. I had basically 6 or 7 years of experience of giving, weekly education on it. But when I had to put it down onto paper and organize it, I mean, it required time and focus and determination. It was very enjoyable to do, but it was also, there was, like anything that you enjoy, there is always going to be a drudgery part to it too, that you have to just push yourself through it. And you can't do that if you don't have that inner conviction, that inner heart that tells you this is what needs to be done. This is what I need to accomplish because this is who I am and this is what I need to do. And so that's where I think meditation is so critical because it allows you to focus on what's important and that what you want to accomplish in your life. Because we only have so much time on earth, and we want to make sure that we accomplish the desires that are placed in our heart to fulfill.
I love that example that you used with the rocks and the sand. That's one that I've used a lot. And there's a couple pieces there that I wholeheartedly agree that meditation cannot be really replaced by anything else. And I think that goes with a couple different factors here. Number one, if you don't meditate, you get up in the morning and you go to work, you're just going to get pulled a million directions, just like what you were saying, Leslie. Kids, all sorts of stuff. You're going to get pulled everywhere. And then you're going to feel like so drained because you're pouring all your energy out into these other activities instead of being able to meditate and then imprint your own energy on all of these tasks, because then you know what you need to get done for you and your goals to make sure that comes and intertwines with all of the other things that you have to do throughout the day.
So you just listened to this episode. Now, join us in being addicted to betterment. Please subscribe to the show, share with your friends, tag us, and please take a moment, leave a review. Yeah, we do want your stars, but we really want the feedback.